World history isn't something that everyone took in high school, especially if you're in the Indonesian schooling system. As someone who was studying to be in the science field at the time, obviously I didn't take the social studies route back then. Very limited information about world history were the ones we got. Most of them are about World War II, a fairly recent event. Only a few years back, when I got into narrative writing and world building, did I start to learn more about different parts of world history. Given it was mainly for world building purposes, but in the end, there's a lot of things to understand from those that our predecessors have done for the world. So, color me surprised when I somehow stumbled upon 3 different people wearing the same name in one day. 3 different people who did the exact same thing in the same exact era. 3 different people who are supposed to be perceived as only one and the same. Welcome to NonsensIcal, a series where I, Ical, talk about anything from Hollywood movies, heron-less books, and how boring a plane ride is. Well, there should definitely be a point being made. Just like the title of the series, this whole thing may as well be some nonsense about 3 totally different Napoleons.
I promised you brilliant successes, and I've kept my word.
To charge right at the things that are painful and difficult, break through to the other side, and take pleasure in that. Don't you think that's truly fantastic? I was in the airport on my way back from a particular trip to the city where I studied medicine. Quite bored by the schedule delays and the tense loneliness of going on a trip by myself, I decided to go to the airport bookstore and found a book called How Do You Live? By Genzaburo Yoshino. Yes, the one that's recently loosely adapted into the animated movie The Boy and the Hero. Now, where's Napoleon in this? Chapter 5 of the book is called Napoleon and the 4 Young Men. In that chapter, we reach the point where the 4 boys in the story will meet a conflict in their life. One of the boys' sister, Kazu, decided to tell them about the story of Napoleon, a real-life hero. Yeah, I can see some frown forming there. Hero? Really? Through the lens of the high school character, the author decided to tell the story of our hero. This part in particular talked about the Battle of Wagram and Leipzig. Especially focusing on the Battle of Wagram, the character focused on Napoleon's excellence and bravery, the way such a general could admire his enemy in the middle of the battle while disregarding his own safety, and the pressure of war was a show of bravery. The Napoleon in Yoshino Sensei's words through the lens of Katsuko was someone who lived with a heroic spirit. Because his whole life was ruled by the spirit, he was heroism itself. Through the emulated naivety of a young lady, I was introduced to a hero named Napoleon. He's a brave man who refused to see the battle from a safe distance, only to admire the enemy. He's someone who stood tall despite understanding the hopelessness of the situation in the Battle of Leipzig. He's someone who's ruled and filled with the heroic spirit that drove him forward. Napoleon is a hero. Well, this Napoleon is a hero. Napoleon is Katsuko's hero, but you can be my hero. Push through the adversities and challenges, move forward, and click that subscribe button. Well, now let me introduce you to the second Napoleon.
You think you're so great because you have boats!
Okay, let's add more context to this. Right before encountering the heroic Napoleon, I met the other one. This one particular Napoleon was the titular character of Ridley Scott's movie, Gladiator. No, it's Napoleon. Well, obviously, it is. Written by David Scarpa, this movie explained the most important era of Napoleon's life. It's about his emergence as an excellent army general and his greatness that led him to be the Emperor of France. Well, not really. They mainly talk about two things: his relationship with his wife, Josephine, and his downfall. The movie brought many reenactment of the big wars. While they showed how great he is as a commander, they also showed him as a flawed one. Twice, he was depicted as someone who actually went down into the war zone only to 1. Fall down from his horse in the Battle of Toulon, or 2. Be confused and immediately retreat in Waterloo. The one campaign that the movie focused more time on was the one to Russia. In that retelling of the events, Napoleon was arrogant, proud, and unwilling to listen to his advisors. He forced the Allied army he commanded to keep on pushing, despite all the red flags that showed. The result? Not only did they only reach the abandoned and later burned down Moscow, they lost more than 500,000 men, totally disregarding the existence of the Battle of Leipzig. Sorry, Katsuko. This incident was depicted in the movie as the direct cause of his exile to Elba. The second focus of this movie was his relationship with Josephine, his wife. Napoleon was depicted to be someone who's eaten up by his insecurity and jealousy. He's someone who's obsessed about his wife, being dependent and controlling at the same time, submissive and domineering at the same time. He even left an important campaign in Egypt only to confirm his wife's infidelity. He made his way back from Elba because he missed Josephine. His rise, fall, tyranny, and ambitions were somehow all connected to this relationship that he had with the Empress. I'm not going to lie. Many experts talked about how inaccurate most elements of this movie were, but in the end, the Napoleon Bonaparte that I got to know was a totally different one. There's no heroic spirit. There was only obsessions and arrogance. This is a Napoleon Bonaparte who's clouded by his enormous insecurities, as if his true identity can only be seen through his hideous parts.
He has held the world hostage with his egotism, his insatiable hunger for power, and his lack of simple good manners. We will all sleep again without him. I believe
a heroic spirit that's not devoted to human progress may be empty and meaningless, but goodness that is lacking in the spirit of heroism is often empty as well. At the end of every chapter in How Do You Live, there's a whole section of the chapter written as notes or lectures from the uncle of the main character. Chapter 5 is no exception. At the end of this particular chapter, Genzaburo Yoshino explained more of his thoughts through the words of the main character's uncle. There, the actual narrative that Yoshino-sensei wanted to write was presented. The first thing written in the chapter was the achievement of the emperor. At 24 years old, Napoleon managed to lead the French army and brought victory in Toulon. Yes, this Napoleon is supposed to be 24 years old. Pretty much his achievement in Toulon distinguished himself from everyone else. It pretty much kick-started his whole career. That led to numerous achievements that eventually led him to being crowned as the Emperor of France. Well, to be fair, he technically crowned himself, quite literally. The uncle wanted his 15-year-old nephew to reflect and ask a question every time he thinks about the extraordinary people in history. What did they accomplish during these extraordinary abilities? The explanations in this particular chapter of the book told the story of Napoleon's achievement, not only military, but with policy and laws, including arts and science. Mind you, this book was published in 1937, so things can be outdated. With that in mind though, it's not a lie when I say the book explained how Napoleon managed to bring something that at least served as the initial push away from the feudal era or to encourage the research on Egypt. But really, the chapter didn't just shower him with praise. The uncle's writing was clearly given as a reminder to the main character about how Napoleon finally reached that spirited moment in Leipzig. While managing to maintain power, slowly the emperor focused on maintaining power for the sake of that power itself. He tried to sabotage Great Britain's trade, and that basically backfired because, to be frank, everyone kinda needed that trade the Great Britain was doing. That then led to the explanation of the big loss in the Russian campaign and how it not only killed 600,000 people, but also brought millions of their friends and family to despair. Once it came to this, Napoleon's authority had already transformed into something harmful to the proper advancement of society. Having watched Ridley Scott's Napoleon at that point, I shrugged, thinking that I know where it was going. I thought it's just going to be this total counterpoint to Kazu's admiration, but turned out I was wrong. The end of chapter 5 instead respected that spirited part while acknowledging the destructive one. It severely criticized Napoleon's shortcoming and downfall, but it also told us about how the British people showed him respect at the end of everything. This part of the book didn't try to convince us that he's a hero. It also didn't try to convince us that he's a menace. It's telling us that he had been both through those 20 years of his life. The truth of being a human as a whole.
I'm melancholy for my home and for our victories together. I want to come home. Will you join me?
This whole thing is not a history lesson. I'm barely informed on this side of history, and that's kinda the point. I was presented with 3 completely different Napoleon Bonaparte: the heroic commander, the insecure emperor of France, and the ambitious human. What I'm focusing on here is the different ways writers decided to tell their story, even the historical ones. Someone could focus on only the spirit and heroism, then tell Kazu's narrative. Someone could completely focus on Napoleon's shortcomings and present it as if he had been that kind of person since the start, like in the movie. I focused on and praised the last example, but I didn't think that it's the only one that's right either. After all, presenting their own points and ideas is the privilege of all writers. In unique cases like historical tales, there's definitely a proper rule to follow, but ultimately, it's the writers who have full control of their own writing. Knowing this, we as readers or consumers of other types of media can't just take anything at face value. That applies to every single thing in our lives. Listening to your friends arguing may require you to listen to both sides first. Understanding clients' requests needs you to read all of them properly first. Voting in a political election demands you to analyze everything first before you make a choice. Looking at different sides, dissecting them to core ideas, and processing them in our own way is the key to properly being aware. Only then, we can fully form our own ideas and express our informed opinion about it. By understanding the 3 different Napoleons, we can properly grow, understand, and fully express our own selves. As I end this video, let me recommend the book How Do You Live? It's recently loosely referenced in this animated movie that actually had nothing to do with it. I decided to read more into the history of Napoleon after all of this, and I would recommend all of you to do the same. There's a lot of lessons to learn from it. Go read something or go watch some epic YouTube historians videos. Ridley Scott's Napoleon though, I'm not sure if I will recommend it to anyone. Talking about what I think about the movie will definitely be its own episode. I'd say watch it and see how you think about it. Well, But as always, if you like this type of content, definitely check out the previous episode about Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. In the meantime, see you later, weebs.